I think that refi and regen finance generally is is about creating kind of more sustainable systems in the context of mostly the climate. It's mostly talking about sort of like what are we, actually building everything on? Well, we're building it in a world that like has a climate that like if it ceases to exist, kind of creates some existential problems for us. And I think that really it's kind of creating incentive mechanisms that otherwise wouldn't exist for markets to be created that then help with that process. So like some of these have done better than others, but like one that has had some challenges has been, for example, like let's say like ClimaDAO. But like ClimaDAO's original intent, I think, was quite good, which was let's create an incentive for people to basically do kind of degen and yield farming activities that then end up providing long-term sustainable funding for basically like a carbon credits market, therefore sort of like sustaining climate over time. And I think those sorts of mechanisms are to me super interesting because you have this problem in Web3 where we do tend to, even in open source software, we tend to really think about like Web3 open source software libraries that we use that like kind of power, Ethereum. And these are valuable things, but we don't really think beyond that. We don't think to like Web2 open source software that we all use in pretty much any of those projects. And we especially, I think, don't tend to think about like the climate. So like this is something that Vitalik has talked a lot about recently, where it's like, what are all these sorts of like non-financial use cases trying to get us to, well, we're really trying to get to like use cases that actually have impact in the physical world and that like hopefully produce this sort of like better global coordination for the next 100, hopefully even 1,000 years, let's say. I mean, that's a very long time frame to work off of. But I think that ultimately the problem is that like we just haven't thought that far. And regen, refi, they're memes, right? They're just kind of like ways of thinking about these problems and kind of a way that produces like a strong sort of narrative force, sort of like solar punk does in my opinion. But these memes and these narratives are super powerful because they produce actual like physical real world results that kind of help sustain some of these things we would otherwise just forget about. So I mean, from my perspective, we've definitely neglected some degree of open source software. I think Web3 is much better at that than Web2. And we've also, I think even in Web3 to some extent, perhaps not as much in the last maybe 6 months to a year, neglected these other substrates like the climate that we rely on. So they're kind of, distinct movements in the sense that, in Web2, the open source software community does not talk to like the climate activist community. They're not like related. They don't like interconnect. But I think that what we're realizing is that actually all these things are interconnected in ways that we just like didn't think about for the last like probably several hundred years. And certainly that like I think especially in the last 50 years as sort of other societal structures and substrates have degraded, we've started to like really be less and less motivated to connect.